of Buenos Aires. And then from Buenos Aires, the Spaniard crossed and conquered that. But in Europe, the Portugal and Spain crowns, they were getting together. So they send a letter to return the village to Portugal and go back to Buenos Aires. Then they fight again in Spain and like in Europe, and they send a letter like, go capture that village again. And that's how basically Uruguay independence started from Portugal. But it was always like the Europeans doing one thing, the Latin American have no, like distributed system problems. That was basically that, like consensus and so on.
And the funny thing is that actually news would take like 3 months to reach there. So by the time it would stop being Portuguese and becoming Spanish, by the time you knew it, it was probably no longer.
So that's really a distributed system problem. Like, you know the guy that is a professor in Braga, I think, Schmal on Twitter, like this. I forget his name. Can I type here?
Yep.
That guy on Twitter.
Well, I know him. Let me see. He was one of.
Interview him. Carlos Vaquero. Yeah.
Oh yes, I know him. Actually, let me. You know him?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, that's really interesting because so he was. Oh, okay. Long story short, many years ago, kind of 15 years ago. Sorry. When was it? 20 years ago. He was working, he was a student in Braga, and he created a thing called Gildot, which is a forum. It's kind of similar to Slashdot.
What's the name?
Gildot.
With J?
Like Gil. Like, let me put it. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I will troll him on Twitter.
That's interesting. Well, he's on my list. Well, he's on my list for two things. First of all, I'm doing a kind of a documentary about the whole forum a few years later, because the whole thing went from 1999 to 2009, and then it stopped. And so I'm going to interview him firstly, and secondly, he's on my list to ask to be on this show as well, which is good. I didn't know that the world is really small. This is a small village. Interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so, it was in Porto. Sorry, but I have to say that I prefer Porto over Lisbon. So I'm not sure if you are friends with me after that or not.
Well, my family is all from Porto, so that's fine by me.
No, that's complete.
Let's not think about that. But yes, you did try. You did touch a nerve there. But you got lucky.
No, that's okay.
You are quite obsessed about that.
Yeah, some people are. I'm okay with Porto or Lisbon. I'm okay with both, to be honest. Right. So, for your information, we're already live on social media and stuff like that. People are seeing this as a kind of a black and white screen. I'm going to push this to go live as in the show, and we'll start from there. Okay, Brazil, are you okay now?
Yes, I'm okay.
Perfect. Good.
As I'm as ready as it will ever be.
All right, let's see if this thing works. Okay. So, should I do this in Portuguese? The start in Portuguese or in English? Okay, let me do both. Let me do both. First in português. Olá, viva, bem-vindos ao Tech Talk London, episódio número 36, hoje com o Alvaro Videla. And now in English, hi, welcome to Tech Talks London, episode number 36, and today with Alvaro Videla. We're just catching up with him because me and Mark, we met him many years ago in Switzerland. And I invited him. He's kind of our first guest in English. And he was telling us that as Portuguese we did something in his country, which is which I didn't knew that. And today in Portugal is the day of the Portuguese communities and the day of Portugal. Also, it's celebrated there. We are both the three of us. So me, Basilio, and Marco. We are in London, and you are in Switzerland, right?
In Switzerland, yeah, Zurich.
Excellent. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and let them know who you are?
Yeah, my name is Alvaro Videla, Old Sound on Twitter. I come from the former Provincia Cisplatina, which was the name that Portugal gave to Uruguay back when they were the colonizers. Yeah, I'm from Uruguay, and I'm living here in Switzerland, working for Microsoft.
When we met you, you were doing some stuff around RabbitMQ. Are you still doing stuff with RabbitMQ?
Yeah, actually, today I started looking into integrations from Rabbit to Azure to see how that could or may work. So as of today, yes. this is una primicia.
Yeah. You also did a book about RabbitMQ, right? If I recall properly, yeah. RabbitMQ in action. How was, because when you put the book out, the platform was just in the beginning, if I recall correctly, right?
Yes. So back then, so RabbitMQ, if I'm not mistaken, is from 2007, probably. I started working maybe around RabbitMQ 2009. And then I got in touch with Manning. We started writing the book with Jason Williams, the co-author. Actually, Jason had started the project. Then I joined him, and we basically chose one chapter each other, and we went and wrote the book. I think it got published in 2011. I'm not 100% sure. But I remember I was already in Switzerland. But yeah, it was kind of early days of RabbitMQ when all this happened.
And for those that don't know what RabbitMQ is, do you like to explain that?
Yeah, so RabbitMQ is a messaging queuing system. That's the MQ side of the name. You can use it to integrate applications, to scale applications. Like the reason we started, I was living in China back then, and we were making a website that had a lot of users, and we had to scale out the profile. So every time somebody will comment on a user profile, it will be very slow.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't need to see the message right away because it's just a comment for you later, like somebody coming to the podcast and saying, hey, I like what you talked last week or whatever. So we started discussing about queuing. Back then, the options were ActiveMQ and RabbitMQ. I checked between both, and RabbitMQ had like the better memory footprint, and we already were using CouchDB. I don't know if you remember the NoSQL wars back in the day. We fought them, had better weapons from a more different age. And yeah, because we already had Erlang in production, we also was a decision why we went to RabbitMQ. And then everything else is, book, blog posts, what you know.
Excellent.
And it's a great piece of tech. It's still used worldwide by major companies from startups to Fortune 500. I use it. The company where I am now, Binary Edge, it's an important part of our infrastructure. So I was looking at the stats now. For example, we have 1,500 consumers connected to our RabbitMQ, and it's processing thousands and like millions of messages a day, and it's running like for 5 years. So it works. Yeah. Of course, not perfect like any other piece of tech. You have to know the pros and cons.
Yeah, I mean, a big shout out to the RabbitMQ team. Yeah. Is that over the years, it was like a 5-people team. We were doing the broker, the website with all the documentation, mailing lists, question and answers, support on IRC channels back when people still use IRC. Today, probably Slack. So it was always a 5-people more or less effort for the whole like build system, clients, Python, .NET, Java, Erlang, PHP, Haskell, Clojure, like you name it, 5 people working on that.
That's
for me
impressive.
From an engineering point of view, was like one of the best memories I have in the industry was working on that team because of all we achieved basically. Yeah.
That's impressive. Okay, I had no idea it was so small.
Yeah.
And one of the things you just mentioned, you were working in China. Now you work in Switzerland, and you're from Uruguay. And one of the topics that we have today, because of all of this pandemic and stuff like that, is remote working. So I think that you are one of the best experience that we can have of telling what is remote working before, because you were doing remote working before this, and now obviously everyone I think in Switzerland they're still in lockdown. Not sure, is it? Do you have any lockdown there?
Here there was never like an official lockdown. There was a close down, let's say, of stores. Like everything non-essential was closed. And the government suggested to stay home.
Okay.
And this was really interesting because, I mean, from Switzerland, there is a big difference, let's say, or gap. No, it's not a gap. It's a difference, cultural difference between the French side and the
German,
Italian side of Switzerland and the German side. Like the Catholics and the Protestants, right? And the Catholics, basically, or French and Italian, they wanted more measures because also the Italian side, by being closer to Italy, was being hit harder by the virus, right? So they wanted stronger measure from the government, and the answer from the German side is people know how to behave. So that's a very Swiss way to tackle the issue, let's say. But yeah, here in Zurich, at least, there was no official lockdown. You could go wherever you wanted. But yeah, people were, you saw the discipline. Supermarket had limited number of people that could go in, barber shops, you name it, everything closed. So only essential stuff was working. Yeah.
Okay. So okay. So when it comes to remote working, what do you, and because you were doing that, what was kind of the challenge for you to do remote working for RabbitMQ and the other companies that you work with? Was it harder back then and it's easier right now, or do you think that it's the same? Nothing changed, or something very significant change because of this pandemic?
I think that, I mean, remote working have had several stages, let's say. So back then, I mean, let me backtrack. One thing is to hire remote people. Another thing is to have a remote first culture, or whatever you want to call that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think at the beginning, the RabbitMQ team was it was London based. It was actually the Fin Tower in front of the Tate Museum. That was where when RabbitMQ was headquartered back in the day. Now they are near the old streets. So you saw that many decisions happened if you were in London. I worked for other companies in the past after RabbitMQ. I don't want to name anyone, but you notice that companies that are not like, they are hiring remote people, but they are not ready for remote work. So they still have this lot of decision being made that I go from my desk to the desk next door or whatever, or next cubicle, right? And this leaves out everybody else that is not there. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge in remote working, and that people don't document stuff on the wikis or whatever it is you use to share knowledge. I think this has improved a lot. And at the current team, I work at Microsoft, the developer advocate team for Azure. We are like all remote. So it's a remote first culture where everything is documented there. All the meetings happen over Teams. So there is you don't see the disparity of the people that are there and the people that are not. There is no like in-group, out-group, or let's say something like that. I believe that will be like the biggest challenge for companies going remote or accepting remote workers. Because again, one thing is to allow you to work from your house from your home. Another totally different is to work everybody remotely, because I think that's the big thing that I see as a potential problem.
So it's not a technological problem. So it's not about the tools or the technology, but actually about the culture that you have that allows people to work remotely or not, right?
Yeah, I think it requires a cultural change. We saw things that companies monitoring others over Zoom, or like having a cam to see if you are sitting at your desk. Like what is that? I mean, managers, they need to understand that it's a different thing with different challenges. Also, when you work remote, this is something like I mean, I'm not sure if there are studies, let's say, but I've seen this commented online many times. Is that as a remote worker, you put more pressure on yourself to kind of perform, let's say, because in a way you need to show your work differently also.
Yeah.
So as a worker, also it's not the same to just be on the office and people see that you are at least sitting on your desk. Here you need to show your work. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I understand that. Like for us, for example, we are a remote first team. We've been remote for 5 years since we started. We don't have an office space, so we have like in Switzerland, London, in Portugal, different locations. So it took a while for everyone to get used to this concept of remote. And you mentioned like the communication. That's the main struggle, like the documentation, the wiki, because everything is async. So we need to make sure that stuff is documented or written down so other people can read about it. Try to avoid private conversations. Let's talk in the public channels. And then most importantly, how that affects each team member individually, because you're working from home or from whatever location, and because you don't have that split between office and your home environment, sometimes you just want to work. And like I mentioned, because you're working remotely, you want to show more work. So of course that life balance takes a lot of time, or takes some time to settle in. And we see that when new people join the company, that takes some time for them to create that balance in their life of what's work, what's home, when they should shut down, how to balance the schedules a bit better, because like you have a bit of that freedom when you work from home. You can adapt your schedules, but that's something that some managers don't understand, and they still expect you to work from 9 to 5 exactly like you're in the office space. And it's like, no, there's a different type of culture now. So yeah, some companies are still struggling to that one.
Especially in a few countries, Portugal being one example, just being on your desk and being seen at your desk actually counts as work. So the moment you're doing your work but not being there, not being seen, that actually the first moment you are now facing a lot of distrust with the fact that you're not. People don't really believe that you're doing any work. So yeah, that's it. Being there, being present at your desk counts as a part of your work. When you're working remotely, you do notice that you have to fill in the gap of actually not performing your role just by showing up. Which ends up being strange.
And that said, one of the tools that we actually need to do remote work is internet, which brings me to the next topic. And there's an article on The Guardian. I think it is, let me check, for the 4th of June, an article from Tim Berners-Lee. If people don't know who this gentleman is, it's one of the creators of the web. And he tells that because of this pandemic, the COVID-19, it makes clear that ever access to the internet should be a new universal right, which is kind of funny because in this country, and when we compare this country, the UK against Portugal, this country has the worst internet ever And we live in London. I'm lucky to have one of the best internet providers here. Doesn't even comes close to the ones in Switzerland, in Zurich, from what I had there. But when it comes to a southern European country like Portugal, this country doesn't have a proper infrastructure, which is kind of funny because if you look at, I've been to the center of London a few days ago, just driving by, and there's a bunch of trucks from OpenReach. So OpenReach is the company that is, it's a public company that provides infrastructure and puts stuff, internet through the ground for people to have access. And there was a bunch of vans around the city just to improve the connectivity. Alvaro, do you think that internet is actually should be a universal right, or is just kind of a more privileged tool that us technologists kind of use and need?
I'm really happy you asked this question. No, I mean, in Uruguay, for example, since the 2 governments ago, probably, they tried to have internet in every home. We are one of the countries that has a 1 laptop per child project actually being successful. Mm-hmm. And that required that for these laptops specifically, there was internet in the whole country. So we modernized the infrastructure up to the point where my mom today has fiber. And when I say my mom, I'm not saying because anything, just because my mom, she doesn't care about computers. She doesn't care about anything. And her most basic internet connection is a fiber connection. And she's in the middle of the countryside. So that's the point where internet reached Uruguay today, where somebody that really doesn't care about computers, even that person has fiber. So for Uruguay, that helped a lot. Kids, they could do all kinds of homework based on the internet. I remember there was a girl that she learned Japanese from the internet. My niece, I think she's trying to learn Korean or something like that because she's a K-pop army member. So so I think it's great, and I think it's something that has to happen. Mm-hmm. And if you are a developed country, you must have that. It cannot be that accessing information and communication, because internet, besides information, is to keep people together, to know, let's say, about the latest of coronavirus, just to name an example, mm-hmm. right? You have the right to, in a democracy, let's say, to have that. There's no way you are not informed and so on, that somebody's charging you for this kind of access. So I'm not saying make internet free for everybody, but I think the idea in Uruguay, when you have a phone line, you have a free, low-speed internet already. So you don't need to pay for internet if you have a phone line. Of course, people will want to have maybe a better thing. So then the basic connection, which is this one I say my mom has, is already fiber. So yeah, that's, I think it has to be like that.
Well, that was quite relevant. The whole concept of if you have a phone, you would have internet. Actually, the only thing I seen similar to that was in Portugal, where at some point they changed. If you had cable connection or internet, you would have a phone, whether you want it or not, a fixed landline.
The other way around.
But Vitor, when you said internet would be a trying to remember the expression you used for a
human right.
A human right. The thing is, we are, as you said, technology guys. We would always consider the internet to be top priority. We would never move to a house that doesn't have internet access for some strange reason. We would just, that would be a deal breaker. Doesn't matter how good the house would be. If we wouldn't be able to have internet there, we just wouldn't be living there. But when you say that it is a
universal right.
even when I do universal right, even when I actually disconnect my technology-oriented brain, I would completely agree that having access to internet, having access to information, even for people that have no understanding of what this whole technology thing, should be a universal right. Everyone should have access to the internet with all its glitter and words. My question to you, Victor, is: do you actually see all the other commodities as universal rights at this moment? For instance, running water, it's a universal right, but still you only have running water in the UK or in Portugal if you pay for it. If you don't pay for it, they will cut the supply of running water to your place. So I do understand your concept of philosophically being a human right, but I don't see it in actually in place in any example, not even for things that we already accept as human rights, like running water or electricity.
Well, the one thing is having access to it, right? Universal right for you to have access to the internet, or like running water or electricity. Here in the UK, no one. If you're gonna go to a house, well, you can have some people. Some might cut that service because you're not gonna pay for that. But you can go to the local council and ask for help, and then the service is going to be restored. So I don't think that as a right, no one stops you. You're going to have a cut, yes, but that can be sorted out with local help, which is the same in Portugal. The thing here, and the article with Tim Berners-Lee, the point was he was trying to reach children. Because here in this country, there's about, from his numbers, 60,000 children that don't have access to the internet, and in the US, it's about 1.2 million children. So it's still a lot of people when they need to do remote education. Give you an example that actually they need access to this. So to his point, and I try to extrapolate that to everyone, because we are technologists, we like this kind of stuff, and we require the internet, and because we need to do remote working, we need to have access. But this was more to the children that actually need remote education and need access to these kind of tools. So to your question, universal right, human right, whatever, I think that people should have access to it. If they don't have directly the local council or the local municipality or something like that should provide you some kind of access. Like Alvaro said, so if you have a phone line, you have some kind of basic internet service, very low speed and stuff like that. That's a good idea, to be honest. In Portugal, we don't have that, and here in the UK, it's even worse. I'm sure that Alvaro, do you have fiber there in Zurich?
Yeah, actually, it's right down this house, like right down where I'm sitting right now, is where the fiber enters this building. So I hope it doesn't cut, but yeah, it's pretty good.
So here, just to give you a quick example, so both me and Marco are using one of the fastest providers here. It's called HyperOptic, and they don't have fiber to your door. They have fiber to the building. So they deliver fiber to your building, and then they use kind of a hub or a splitter, and they split that through Ethernet to your home. But in Portugal, in the village, I have fiber directly to my modem. It's there. It's over there. So that's the kind of the disparity of the service that you can get from different countries, which surprised me. Yes, Basilio.
Quick question: if you've got 400 megabits of fiber to the home, or 400 megabits on an Ethernet cable, would the 400 megabits be different in any shape? Because I'm pretty sure they would be. We're talking about the same bits, right? So having fiber to the home or having an Ethernet cable, philosophically, there is a difference there, but I do believe that in the end, if it works, it works.
Well, it depends.
But I keep hearing people saying, "Oh, I want fiber until I want fiber up to my laptop." People would actually plug the laptop on a fiber cable if they were allowed to, but it doesn't really mean anything, does it? Apart from the bragging rights if you've got 500 megabits or a gigabit, it doesn't really matter if it's fiber or if it's Ethernet. It's a lot.
Well, it's still a lot. Yes,
Just
it's
saying.
still a lot.
It doesn't really matter what's the medium. Either you have something very good or you're just stuck at 24 megabits, which is something very, very crappy. But yes, I do see the whole discussion of the quality of the internet access and the fact of internet access as human right will become quite relevant, especially now that kids are having school at home supported
Yes.
on the internet, and that will be a major drive on the next few years.
One of the things that they did in Uruguay was to have the main squares to have internet, schools to like free Wi-Fi. I mean, schools to have a free Wi-Fi, and I think these computers build a mesh between each other. So I'm not sure how they like the one laptop per child thing. I think they are connected to each other, and then from there to the school and so on. So maybe there is something else, even in case there is not a nearby Wi-Fi or something. I really don't know the details, but I know that was something they were mentioning back then. Besides that, you could literally go to the school. In the States, I know, which I think is kind of precarious, that you can go to a library and have internet there, but it's not the same as having it at your own home, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and as Alvaro was mentioning, the need to have internet, not just for the communication, for learning, but also to have access to the news, which brings me to the next topic, which is Google is what?
You're using the crappiest
I am
ever.
I am. It's just amazing how the whole thing links together. It's just really cool.
You're like the kind of DJ that is playing Eminem song and then it switches into another song with the worst bridge ever. But
doesn't matter.
I'm actually cheering for your effort. I'm giving you points.
Come on, this is.
This one. Thank you. Let's just wait.
This is all connected to each other. This is I have a script here. I need to move forward. So I was yes. So internet access for what? For news. So people are using internet to get news and to, as Alvaro said, to get news from COVID, obviously. But not only that. But one of the issues, and I think that it was I think it was a comedian, something like that. He did a report about how local news are disappearing. Either they're being bought by private equity companies, first of all, and they're closing down the newspapers and stuff like that. And obviously Google, Facebook, and who else? Well, those two. They are kind of killing the news industry because firstly, they are providing access to some of the news through their own network. They are being the channel for people to disseminate news and share stuff. But also, especially Google, they don't return all of the profits to the newspapers or the news agencies or the TV channels and stuff like that. So Google decided to create a project called, and this one was kind of interesting because it was a mix between English and Spanish, which is to support the local news, or as Alvaro can say better than me in Spanish, support what is it? Apoya noticias locales. Is that the right accent?
I tell you in Uruguay, apoyar las noticias.
There you go. I shit you not. The only thing I know about Spanish is "Si a ti te encanta, a mí me gusta, cariño." Everything else for me is just and that came from a very 90 movies in Spanish that doesn't matter. So yes,
specific.
exactly. So support local news. Alvaro, do you think that this is a good idea for Google to return some of the dollars that they get from cutting access to local news to local newspapers and create this kind of base for them to be supported like this? Or do you think that they should actually provide a different way for them to support themselves and actually have people to engage with the news in a different way?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's difficult because we are in the internet age, right? So everybody wants to have the newspaper or whatever online and so on. I would prefer newspapers to stay independent, to have their own source of income, if that means advertisement from Google or whoever else. That's like the current business model, I would say. But to have like a centralized kind of thing, no. In Uruguay specifically, I don't believe this can work, because Uruguay is a country, so we have like 3 million people, right? Half of the population is in Montevideo, the capital. Another Portuguese word. When the Portuguese crossed the land, they put this name. And then the other half of the population is in the countryside. And we have basically every 50 kilometers, 30,000 people town. That's how the country is built, right? So every 50K, 30,000 people city or whatever. Each of those cities has its own newspaper. And in Uruguay, news are either what happens in Montevideo, which is those are the national newspaper, but I just talking about Montevideo. They don't want to tell you that, but that's what's going on. And then you have the local newspapers talking about the city's own news. And they are very independent from the rest. For sure, it's harder for them to survive. And it's been harder and getting harder and harder. I used to work in one of those newspapers back like over 20 years ago. But yeah, I prefer them to be independent.
So, so you prefer to either subscribe, donate, or advertise within the newspaper and not have either Google or Facebook supporting the media for them to survive. Is that it?
I think, I mean, we have seen it in the past with Google when there is no business need or some change or I don't know what. Bye-bye reader, right? Everybody will cry in the internet, crying in reader tears. Anyway, so I'm not sure how sustainable this effort can be coming from a multinational big corp. I don't think because news are tied to democracy, and I don't see how this can help that. Yeah.
Marco and Basilio, how do you consume the news? It's through social media, or you go directly to the source and consume them?
Mainly during my day, it's mainly comes from social media, from Twitter. That's my main source of the news of like what's happening at the moment. But then during the day, I might go to a few certain websites directly from the BBC, the Guardian, to get a bit more data or just to see what's on those main channels that I don't see during the day. Because then like the news, like on TV, I don't watch the news on TV, so that's out of question. But I do agree with Alvaro, like having Google or others kind of paying or subsidizing the news, the media doesn't sound like independent. Like Alvaro said, like the news are a source of independence or a source of democracy. They're important for democracy, and we need to be ensured that what these publications are writing about, they are independent. There are no ties that are guiding their editions, their publications. Unfortunately, we know many cases where that happens, and I think there are only a few handful of publications worldwide that we would trust to be independent. And I think we kind of need to work on ways for that to continue, because if journalists are not independent anymore, then what do we know about what is real and what is not?
But there's also an issue of them to have actually better innovation, right? Because if after all these years, if the best solution is for us to subscribe to something to have access, so if you have a paywall and you actually need to subscribe to something, And there are multiple ways for us to subscribe to content, right? YouTube has one of those things. People are using Patreon to put their content there. Probably the paywall is the best solution for this kind of media. But there are all other ways to subscribe to stuff. Do you guys think that in this kind of media, newspapers, they are doing any kind of innovation, or they're just using the same formula all over again with ads, with paywalls and stuff like that, and there's nothing really innovative coming out of there? What do you think, Alvaro?
I mean, the ones I follow, they feel that there is nothing new. Either have a bunch of ads. Mm-hmm. One of these newspapers from Uruguay, I don't want to name names, but when you play a video full volume, when I don't even ask, like, I'm closing your website. I mean, that's, yeah. So I think there is a disconnect from what let's say a tech-savvy person wants, and usability, UX, everything. Even there, I think they fail to give you a website where you feel comfortable browsing it, reading the news. And yeah, maybe it's fine that you show me an advertisement because you need to pay for whatever this is happening, right? But they lack such an understanding of the web that they break the experience of what you are trying to consume. So I think they need to have like a more even investment in UX to improve what they're trying to offer. Because again, it's not possible that I open a news article and suddenly I'm charging some music or some I don't even know what, and I need to start checking which tab it is that is playing. I don't get what's going on. I just wanted to read who won, Porto or Benfica. So I haven't seen innovation, and when what they tried, I think is not well deployed, let's say. Could be better.
On my example, I stopped buying newspapers somewhere in the mid-90s. I stopped watching the news on TV by 2005 or something, because it was always just like everything was wrong in the world. They were just promoting the worst news ever. And at some point, I had news sites like CNN on my start page, which was what we used to have back in the days of the internet. I would have the site that would open as soon as I could connect to the internet. I believe I stopped having CNN on the start page by 2010 or something, which was actually quite late. Nowadays, I mostly get the information via Twitter as Marco, and then I kind of search around for the other. Or whenever I see a link that is relevant, I kind of do another parallel search to just see what's the whole story about it. But this is mostly because I've heard you talking a lot about independence and being able to report news as they actually are, not being influenced by whoever is paying them or whichever political party they're supporting. I have absolutely no faith at all any news channel that I would get an unbiased report of the news. So I always assume that whatever happened is being sold to me in a way according to their own agenda, and this applies to everything that I consume via Twitter or via whatever means I get. So there is always this need to check on several sources if I really care about the subject, or I just accept the first one and move along. But I know that I'm consuming something, accepting something that is skewed from reality. Now, with regards of the whole paywall thing, it's the same thing that we have with Netflix, with Amazon Prime Video, with Apple with all the things we can use to consume media, which is, if we really want to have a broader view, we need at least 5 different subscriptions, which is a royal pain. And I believe none of us really wants to subscribe to the Guardian, the Telegraph, the New York Times, and have like 5 different subscriptions just to have a correct understanding of things. I was extremely happy when the internet started and it was supported by publicity. That it was a model that would always work best for me. So the whole concept of a paywall doesn't really work for me. Not for news at all.
Good. But well, that's your opinion.
That's your opinion, man. Something I read today, because there was a discussion on Uruguayan reporters. Because senator, I think, say that they were censoring some news or whatever. But this journalist came and say, every newspaper has their point of view. Like they will be from a political party, probably, right? The important thing, he said, is that they are transparent. I think that's a really good measure. That at least you know where they're coming from. Like they are a right newspaper from this party or a left from this other part. I mean, not from the party, but let's
kind
say
of the political views
from the policy from that. Yeah, I think that kind of transparency is really important, and you need to know that there is a view they support and a view they won't support, and you know what you're getting. Let's say. I think that's really important, not to have a fake. We are the independent, transparent news that doesn't exist.
Yes, the same thing we have here. Everyone assumes that the Telegraph is the conservatives' voice, and the Guardian is the Labour voice.
Yeah,
and I do understand. I would agree with you, having that transparency, that understanding that they are not there. They are kind of open about the fact that they are influenced towards that party helps.
We lost you. Okay.
At least it's not in Portugal, where journalism is independent, but then in the end it isn't, but people still live under the impression that it is independent, and they still have discussions with regards to this.
All right.
But yeah, like going to the topic like of how media makes money nowadays, I think that's still something that the industry needs to rediscover a new way to make money. They can't live with ads as they used to, or selling newspapers as they used to. And I think the industry is still in that phase of trying to rediscover. Are they gonna survive in the future?
Exactly. So how can
maybe we're not gonna have 50 newspapers and 50 magazines and all of that stuff. Like there's gonna be less. But now, which ones are going to survive, and how? That's going to be a big question.
Exactly. Yeah.
One thing I see, if sorry, I know you need to do your next next point in the agenda, but something I have seen as innovation, which I think is cool, is when newspapers use the media where they are presenting content. So one of these main newspapers from Uruguay, they are developing video interviews, and maybe that content you have to pay to access. Or during the elections in the state where the New York Times and so on, they have these really cool graphics and stuff that you really, let's say, you need a browser to see. I think that kind of innovation can drive money, let's say, to them. And it's a good place to say, because use the media that you have. I mean, a website is not a page that is shown on a browser. And maybe some of this content is like a paywall or not, I don't know. But when you have the videos, interactive graphics and so on, that is where maybe you are offering something different. And there I have seen that they are adapting to the current times, let's say.
Good.
Yeah.
And because we're talking about innovation. One of the next topics is about open innovation. So, this article came from a Harvard Business Review, and they said that they were discussing open innovation during COVID-19. For them, they kind of asked the question: is this a good time to actually innovate in technology? That's kind of the main questions that they had, the main question that they left with the article, but also because people are now learning how to collaborate more. They are thinking that innovation should come from collaboration. Obviously, that's what we've been telling everyone in technology for the past 20 or 30 years. Innovation comes with collaboration, obviously. But they also say that sometimes intellectual property is also an impact on innovation. One of the examples that I use innovation through collaboration is with, let me see if I get this right. So the German multinational Siemens started a thing called Adaptive Manufacturing Network to anyone that could help develop a medical device design. Scania partner with a hospital to convert trailers into mobile testing stations for the COVID-19. And Ford is working with the United Auto Workers and GE Healthcare to provide ventilators. So there's a bunch of technology companies and manufacturers that actually had to reinvent themselves and go and say, well, listen, we are here to help. We're not just building cars or building computers or building this kind of stuff. We actually want to help the society, and we want to bring this kind of innovation. Alvaro, do you think that this is the good time for actually bring more innovation to the market, especially around technology?
I think it has to be innovation with a purpose, not just this technology. I mean, I think we as technologists always think that we solve everything with technology. So if I'm a car company, maybe people need more cars. If I'm a computer company, people need more computers or whatever, right? So I think in something as sensitive as COVID, we need to know from the experts. Maybe the medical experts, they don't know that there is a solution in the automobile industry that will help them, right? So there is where the company needs to propose. Yeah. Hey, look, we have blah, 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 such and such. Can we help with this? But not, hey, here is our thing. Like, I see it's like we push too much technology and not just try to understand the needs. And maybe then in discussion with doctors or whoever, they can understand what is actually, okay, you have that, we need this other thing, okay, maybe you downscale this to, I don't know, whatever, and we have a solution. But as technologists, I think sometimes we try to push our hammer too much instead of seeing maybe they need a screwdriver or whatever.
When you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
Do you think that...
yeah, I agree with you. Technologists have a bit of that tendency. Let's push technologies and then we'll figure out if it works for the user or not.
I'm pretty sure all the COVID problems can be solved with RabbitMQ.
Or blockchain.
Blockchain. What is it? Kubernetes before was Hadoop.
Yeah.
But do you guys think that any kind of intellectual property throughout the pandemic should be kind of put aside, and actually people should focus more on the technology and not on the property that belongs to someone? I remember Brazil a few years ago. They need to develop the HIV what was it? Drug, and because it had intellectual property from some pharmaceuticals, what happened was they decided, well, this intellectual property here in the Brazil is not going to be applied because we want to develop our own HIV drug to fight this disease. So because we want to develop it, we don't have money to actually pay the intellectual property. That thing is not going to be applied here. So I'm just trying to figure out, and because you you kind of put your ideas into a book about I don't know how can I put this, and you can actually put a bit of your experience and knowledge. There you go, knowledge into paper for people to actually consume that, because they need to pay to have access to the book. Would you be kind of concerned if people start using your book just to learn more, and not paying you royalties for that content? I know it's a stretch, but I'm just trying to fish.
I mean, yeah. First, regarding patents or whatever, that if we are talking about medical issues and the life of people, I think this should be put aside. That's because, again, problems need to be analyzed in context, right? Should we abolish patents, or should we try to solve this particular coronavirus situation, right? I think in the context of coronavirus, people's lives are more important than I don't know, profits. I think that should be the priority. What's the point of having profit if you don't have people later? I mean, it's pretty clear. Regarding knowledge, honestly, but this here depends again. I don't make a living out of writing, right? And you will never be rich writing tech books unless you write about Kubernetes or Bitcoin. I don't know. But so I don't care how people access my book. Every time I went somewhere and say, "Hey, I'm hearing some echo."
Indeed.
Maybe something.
Who opened the stream?
Yeah.
I'm certain it was Basilio.
Nope.
Okay.
So anytime I went to give a talk about RabbitMQ, I told people, "Hey, you can buy the book here, or you can buy it on some Russian website. I don't care." But in my situation, I do not live out of writing books.
Yeah.
But that's I think knowledge should be freely accessible. I'm all these paywalls we know from papers and several institutions that make money out of the research paid by the government and the people, basically. So we pay in taxes, so the people can study at the university, they write research, and then we need to pay for the research to read it, like what's going on. And sometimes the price is ridiculous for what you are actually getting, because maybe I understand you are hosting stuff. Okay, you need to pay for a server, you need to pay for some bandwidth. Okay, I get it, but not like some books that cost $100 or €100 for 50-page books with 5 papers. I don't know. I think sometimes the whole thing gets ridiculous. So in my case, that I don't live out of writing, I don't care how people get access to it. I mean,
okay.
it's.
Yeah, I do see that, and that will be an ongoing discussion for quite a while. The thing between patent protections and innovation and free access to technologies, it will be an ongoing discussion for quite a while. But I do understand that you would say, I wouldn't stop writing books, even if you're not getting any money out of it. But at some stage, you're actually doing, that's your work. That's something that you do has value, so you should be getting compensation for that. But yes, it's shocking, the current situation. Not just you paying for something that was already paid via taxes, but for instance, in Portugal, the Portuguese Society of Authors, SPA. Sorry, yes.
Something, yeah. So what happens when I was in China? Which, here. Wait, give me a second. I bought this. Okay, I will change it before my computer flies away. But look at this. Where is the camera? Can you see that? That's the C-book in Chinese. I mean, a Chinese edition. Exactly, Kernighan and Ritchie, but the book is in English, and it's a very cheap edition. You could buy it for 70 yuan, like really cheap for the Chinese market. I know India has something similar. And sometimes you get those books here in Europe and they say not to be sold outside India. So a problem I think the publishing industry has is that they don't consider countries that are in development or underdeveloped countries, where a $50 book is a salary. When I started programming in Uruguay, I didn't have a credit card, so I couldn't order on Amazon. The book already was, like, as I say, super expensive. One book will be like 40 meals. So are you going, plus shipment, which is another 40 meals.
Yeah.
So are we taking into account those people, which I was part of those people? I think what they do in China or in India is a really great example of how this can be solved. Have a licensing contract where you say, okay, for this population, this book costs this much money. It's a cheaper edition, cheaper paper, whatever. I don't know. I don't know how they deal with that. I mean, I know some of these books have a bit lower quality, but you are interested in the content, and even more if you're a student. But in other countries like in Uruguay, probably Argentina, it's really expensive to access knowledge. I don't know what's the situation in Brazil, which is like quite a big country. But yeah, so again, for me, sometimes we have this discussion and we are only thinking of Europe or the States, but there are a whole lot of researchers, let's say in Africa and South America, in Asia, that they still need the access to the content. And the prices are just totally prohibitive. And I know that people need to be paid for their work, but also we need to find a solution that people that don't have the means, and not because they don't work, they work the whole month for whatever they're doing, but they still don't have the money to buy books or papers or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. And changing to topics, and because we were discussing about also innovation in healthcare, and Alvaro said that because of the pandemic, people should have access to so the intellectual property around healthcare should be kind of not used because people need it's people's health above intellectual property. But the case here is about telemedicine, or the way that you access your doctor. Here in the UK, we call it GP, general practitioner. And what happens is here we have, and because people were staying at home, they will need to have access to their doctor, to their GP. And there's an application that people could actually use and do video calls with their doctor. Just saying, well, listen, I have something, I'm not feeling well, I need to do something happen, and the doctor on the other side kind of looks at you through video and tries to provide some kind of diagnosis or whatever, tries to help you. Then the entire process to provide the prescription and everything related to that is provided through the app, but you can actually go to the pharmacy to do that. So it's a very modern kind of system here in the UK. I'm not sure if in Portugal there's a glimpse of this. I'm mistaken, but I don't think that's there. Either way, that application here suffered a major data breach. So someone accessed to the application and actually could see other patients' video, which is kind of funny. More funny is because the health minister here, Matt Hancock, went to the parliament to a commission or something to discuss about healthcare contact trace and test and stuff that he has, and he didn't knew that application on his because this kind of GP had access. He belongs to this kind of area of these doctors, and some of the data was leaked. So bottom line, we're providing a bunch of information to our doctors through video and stuff like that. That platform has a massive security issue, and people have their right to not trust this kind of platform. Alvaro, would you use this kind of application to talk to your doctor through video, or you prefer face-in-face, more kind of interaction?
I mean, the problem I think is the consequences, because, yeah, this is something, again, living in Uruguay is like completely different from the rest of the world in the sense that we have free healthcare, always have free healthcare. And what do I mean by that? When I went to China, the company paid the insurance for each of the employees, right? So they make me sign a whole form saying what are your previous conditions and this and that and blah and blue, which I had no idea that was a thing. Because in Uruguay, you are born, you can access the health system. There is no questions. There is no previous condition. There is nothing. You just have the right. So if you have a data breach, what happened with insurance companies? What can they do against you? I mean, one day I had like a back problem here in Switzerland, like just a muscle pain. After that, every other insurance told me for the next 4 years you cannot report back pain problems. Just like that. And it was like one day I went to the so I after that, if I have like small pains, I just don't go to the doctor because I have no idea what are the consequences in this kind of system, right? So when you have that kind of apps where this kind of data breach can happen, I'm suspicious. Honestly, I'm really suspicious.
Vitor, you said, got a pop-up here. You said, you asked Alvaro if he would be okay with using the app or going to a normal GP. Actually, my health insurance only allows me to use Bupa, which is exactly the app that had the data breach. So I have no option when it comes to private insurance. And for now, even the state health provider is going to use the NHS is actually using an app for initial screening. So I don't think we have an option at any point, at least in the UK, and that will happen to almost every country. They will move to digital platforms, so your data will be out there. Whatever insurance companies will learn about you, they will use it to their best interests. The world everything is wrong, and it will even become worse, and it's a doomsday scenario, in my opinion.
Well, in this case, the application was built by Babylon Health, which is running the COVID-19 data gathering stuff here in the UK, which is not kind of good, right? Because this company, Babylon Health, is already known in the US. I think it's connected to Peter Thiel, the guy from PayPal. So it's not the references that we have when it comes to this kind of stuff. It's not good, especially when you have data breaches when it comes to GPs. It's to be honest, if I have to use something and I know that that's not secure at the end, I will be freaking out, because having a discussion with the GP, with my doctor, and having all of that put out there, not just because of the insurance, but because of it's deeply rooted into my kind of privacy, and it feels kind of awkward. Marco, would you use the application? It happens the same with your health insurance provider?
Yeah, we have an app. I haven't used it yet. So I have the private health insurance, but we have the public NHS. I was like, whatever I need, just go to NHS. So privately, haven't used it. If they would act, I would most likely stop using them. But again, the data is already exposed, so I don't know. But I use I use NHS. So
good.
Then
all right, so let's
have private, but don't use it. So
let's change.
I'm a bit like Alvaro.
let's change the topic and move to something more interesting because we are way above the time. And the last topic, I know it's something that Basil really appreciates because he's a true Apple fan. And Apple apparently is moving to ARM. We already knew that. They're doing that. But apparently they're going to have some models with the MacBook actually running ARM. As a developer, does this affect any of you? As in, is it helpful for them to have chips with ARM, or it's just some more marketing around it? What do you guys think about this kind of move? Alvaro.
I think it's gonna be.
Marco, let's start with you. Yeah.
I think there's gonna be a big impact in the processor world. Intel and AMD are going to have to pick up the game when this happens. It was a matter of time. Like, we've been seeing all the improvements Apple has been doing on their ARM processors. So it was really a matter of time until they announced that they were going to put it in a MacBook. We can see stuff like with the Raspberry, like ARM is being pushed in more and more devices. A lot of the technologies we use on a day-to-day, on a daily basis, are already, most of them, compatible with ARM. From Docker to Kubernetes. I think Rabbit also is running on ARM already. So there's like a bunch of stuff that we use on a daily basis that's already working on ARM. Amazon released quite recently their servers running on ARM. So you can have like really cheap servers with 64 cores comparing to the Intel processors on Amazon. So more and more this is gonna happen in the future. So we're gonna have more and more competitive. We're gonna have a more competitive environment. So it's gonna be better for us developers or technology companies, whatever. It's gonna be better for us. So it's gonna be more competition. It's not gonna be just Intel, and well, maybe sometimes AMD in the middle. What the impact for us? Well, on my side, I see like this is gonna be the same as in 2006 when Apple went from PowerPC to Intel. Yeah, it sucked for 2-3 years while everything was being compiled and changed. But I think like things should go faster this time. Like, Apple has experience of doing that. Most of the technology can be cross-compiled because we're using libraries and things like that make it easy.
Sure.
So it should be easier than like last time Apple did it. But impact-wise, I think there's going to be a huge impact in the industry. Prices will be coming down, and we will be seeing performances go up. And of course, there should be other issues. But I think it's going to be an interesting move, and I'm interested to see what Intel is going to do.
Alvaro, what do you think about it? Is it a good move?
I mean, for Apple, for sure, because they are independent from the rest. For the rest, I don't know, but something I think could have a big impact is in open source. Everything that is compiled and cannot directly, like, magically run on ARM, those projects will have a lot of time having to port their build systems and so on to work on Apple. For sure, like you say, will take maybe some years, like when the PowerPC thing happened. But from the point of view of the open source maintainer, that is people that usually are not being paid for the jobs and so on, that I think could be a problem. Even some projects, maybe because the maintainers don't have the power or the time, money to keep doing that, maybe some projects will die, or some other projects will prominently rise. So I think from a developer perspective, I see the problem there. From a consumer perspective, yeah, maybe some program doesn't work right now, but it will be fixed sooner or later. But from a developer and in open source specifically, that could be a game changer, have a severe impact. Yeah.
Good. Basil, are you happy with it?
I would like just to add that Apple they have changed from CPUs, at least. Well, it's 4 times in 4 decades. And they're getting quite good at it. The first time when they abandoned Motorola 68000, which was the original Macintosh CPU, to PowerPC, and then from PowerPC into Intel, and now from Intel to ARM. I don't. For instance, Microsoft never did this. You only get Windows on x86. There were some experiments with Alpha AXP, but that was mostly for the NT server version. But on Windows, they have lots of backward compatibility problems, but they have the luxury of always running on x86. I do like to say that Apple is actually quite good at switching from one platform to another. So saying we stopped using this CPU and now we'll use a completely different family of CPUs, a completely different set of code. When they did the change from 68,000 to the PowerPC, there were a couple of years of pain. The change from PowerPC to Intel was extremely smooth, and the change from Intel to ARM, I will believe it will be probably incredibly painless, to the extent that most people won't even notice that they have changed it, and they will actually be supporting both lines at the same time for throughout a lot of an extensive time. So the reason why I firmly believe this was when Apple did the change from 32 bits to 64 bits in iOS in 2013. Most users didn't even acknowledge the fact that they have made a huge change on 32 to 64 bits, and we've seen how clumsy that was on Windows. So when Apple decides to switch to a new platform, it's getting actually quite better at doing that. For the end user, there won't be any major noticeable difference. But apart from the obvious thing, which is you can now run Windows applications natively inside macOS. You're not emulating the CPU. You will go back to the times where actually, if you have an ARM machine and you want to run any emulation of Windows, you will be emulating the code of the x86, and that will come with an obvious penalty.
Performance.
So apart from the whole thing with the market of the CPUs, which is always something that is changing, but it's their game. It's nothing to do with us. The end user won't feel any hiccups while using this app will explode because it was not properly ported to ARM or something like this. I believe Apple has now the proper solutions to those things, but the ability to run Windows programs in a Mac box almost seamlessly, which we have nowadays, it's going to take an inevitable hit there. It's going to go back a couple of years in performance, and we will never have that performance again. That's my opinion.
Okay, good. Well, we are way beyond our time. Alvaro, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I know that you are 1 hour ahead of us, so sorry about that.
I mean, illegal speaking time in Switzerland. You know that.
Exactly, I know. You need to be a bit quiet, otherwise the neighbors will bother you. I know. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Alvaro.
Obrigado.
And for everyone that is watching us, I'm gonna just switch back to Portuguese. Nós voltamos na próxima sexta-feira às 21h30 no YouTube, no Twitter e no Facebook. Obrigado